It was on a dull, windless afternoon in late October when we moved into the apartment that would mark the start of our new life together. It should have been a joyous time. Jen and I had saved for months, scrounging pennies and cutting costs wherever we could, to escape the cramped studio we'd barely managed to afford downtown. We were ready for something quiet, more grown up, a place where we could feel stable. The building wasn't perfect. It was old and battered, some of its paint flaking, its corridors dim, and its walls thin. But it was within our price range, with an extra bedroom that Jen could use as an office for her freelance work. More than that, it felt like a step forward. The first day, we heaved cardboard boxes up 3 flights of creaking stairs. Our new apartment door, 3B, opened onto musty carpet and oddly patterned wallpaper. Still, we made the best of it, setting down boxes and dreaming about how nice it would look once we got everything put away. I remember Jen smiling and saying, "We'll paint the walls a warmer colour, maybe a soft cream," and me nodding, picturing a pleasant reading corner by the window. Outside, autumn's early twilight coloured the sky a hesitant purple. We'd just begun to unpack when I heard a muffled scraping noise through the far wall. Our bedroom shared that wall with apartment 3C next door. At the time, I didn't think much of it. An apartment building is bound to have its quirks. People moving furniture, rearranging their belongings, living their lives. We were new neighbours. It made sense there'd be some commotion. But as the days slid by, we realised that something was off. The man next door, he lived alone, that much was clear, made noises at odd hours. Not loud music or TV, not parties or arguments, but strange shuffling sounds late at night, well past midnight. I sometimes woke with a start to a rhythmic thump against the shared wall, or a drawn-out scraping, like a heavy object being dragged across the floor. Then silence, followed by a soft mumbling I could never decipher. Eventually it would stop, and I'd lie awake, wondering if Jen heard it too. One morning over coffee, I asked Jen if she'd noticed anything. She nodded, looking concerned. "Yeah, I've heard it. It's weird, right? Like he's pacing or something. Or moving furniture around in the middle of the night," I said. We both laughed uneasily. Still, we let it go. People have insomnia or unusual schedules. Maybe he worked nights and was just getting home at 3 a.m, too wired to sleep. When we finally met him, it was even more unsettling. Jen and I had stepped out into the hallway to pick up a delivery. That's when the door to 3C opened, and out he came. He looked mid-30s, maybe older, it was hard to tell. His hair was thin and messy, and he wore a stained grey t-shirt that hung loosely on his frame. He didn't say a word, he just stood there for a moment, staring at the ground. I offered a friendly smile. "Hi, we're new here, just moved into 3B. He glanced up as if startled, looked over at us, and nodded. Not a single word left his lips. His eyes had deep circles beneath them, and his cheeks were sunken. He looked exhausted, the way people look after running on no sleep for days on end. Jen tried a casual, "How's it going?" But the man just blinked, took a breath as if about to answer, then closed his door again. The latch clicked softly, leaving us in a silence more unnerving than any shout could have done. We kept an eye on him after that. Not out of malice, just curiosity and concern. During the day, he drifted in and out of the building like a ghost, rarely acknowledging us or anyone else. Twice, I saw him standing in the lobby, looking up the stairwell with a distant gaze. Another time, he was crouched by the mailboxes, running his fingers along the scratched metal surface as if he'd never seen one before. If I said hello, he'd nod weakly or flinch slightly, but he'd never speak. At night, the noises persisted. Quiet thuds, scraping, murmurs. Always late. Always when everything else in the building was still. Our nerves wore thin. Jen suggested we ask the landlord if there had been complaints, but I was reluctant to stir up trouble so soon. "Give it a few more days," I said. "We don't know what he's dealing with." As the weeks passed, we started to notice other oddities. He never seemed fully awake. He'd move slowly down the hallway with drooping shoulders. In the daytime, he looked like a man in a trance, eyes half-lidded, mouth slack. Sometimes he'd pause outside his own door, pressing his ear against it as if listening. Other times, he'd flinch at sudden noises, like a car horn from outside, and then dart quickly into his apartment, shutting himself away. I remember once, after a particularly bad night's sleep, he'd been moving something heavy across the floor at 3 a.m. I decided I needed some sort of explanation. I waited in the corridor until I heard his door open. He stepped out, hands trembling, and I mustered my courage. "Excuse me," I said softly. He froze. "I'm sorry to bother you, but we've been hearing noises late at night. Are you okay? Do you need help with anything?" He turned slowly, eyes locking onto mine. For a second, I thought I saw raw fear behind them. He opened his mouth, but no words formed, just a faint croak. Then he shook his head frantically and mumbled something I couldn't catch. "I'm sorry," he muttered finally, voice dry as dead leaves. I'm sorry. I'll try to keep it down." Without another glance, he hurried off down the hallway, leaving me dumbfounded. When I told Jen about the encounter, she shrugged. "Maybe he's got sleep issues or some mental health problem. We should be sympathetic." I agreed, though I couldn't shake the feeling that he was afraid. Of what? I had no clue. As autumn wore on, the weather outside turned chillier, and our neighbour's behaviour grew stranger. Some nights, I woke to quiet crying. Through the walls, I could hear soft sobs, muffled, so I could never be certain if I was imagining them. On others, I heard what sounded like whispers, one-sided conversations too low to understand. Once or twice, a high-pitched whine that made my skin crawl. We tried putting on a fan to drown out the noise, or sleeping with earplugs. Sometimes that helped. But then, one early morning, I woke abruptly at 4 a.m. to a thud so loud, I swore something heavy had struck the wall. Jen bolted upright beside me. We listened for a short moment. After a minute, Jen got up, went to the wall, and pressed her ear against it. She frowned and shook her head. No more sounds came that night, but neither of us got any more sleep. Over the following days, the tension in our apartment thickened. Jen was more irritable, snapping at small inconveniences. I found myself jumpy and anxious, paranoid that something was terribly wrong next door. We started talking about calling the landlord, or even the police, but we had no real complaint beyond strange noises. We had no proof of anything criminal, just a man who seemed disturbed or tormented. I tried to talk to some of our other neighbours to gather information. Down the hall, in 3A, lived a retired teacher named Mrs. Palmer. She was kind enough, offered me tea and biscuits when I knocked on her door. But when I mentioned the man in 3C, her kindly expression flattened. "That poor fellow," she said, with a sad shake of her head. "He's been like that for a few months now. Keeps to himself. I don't know much else, dear." She closed the door gently, as if reluctant to say more. I caught a glimpse of the building superintendent, Wallace, one afternoon. He was in the stairwell, replacing a light bulb. I took the chance to ask about 3C's occupant. Wallace just grunted. "Guy's name's Adrian, I think. Paid his rent on time until recently. Haven't seen him complaining. Quiet type." When I pressed about the nighttime noises, Wallace shrugged. "Haven't had no complaints. Old building. Maybe you're hearing the pipes." His tone ended the conversation. It was around Thanksgiving when things escalated. By then, the days were shorter and the corridors of our building felt gloomier. Adrian, I used the name Wallace had given, though I still wasn't sure it was correct, looked worse each time I saw him. He stumbled around like a man halfway to collapse, his eyes red and watery. I found him once, sitting on the stairs, head in his hands, muttering softly. I caught a few words. "Not again. Please, no more." Before I hurried away, uneasy and ashamed of eavesdropping. That same evening, Jen and I settled down to watch a movie. We tried to pretend everything was normal. Around 10 p.m, just as the climax of the film approached, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from our shared wall. Jen muted the TV. We listened, hearts sinking. 2 taps, followed by a scrape. It was as if Adrian was running his fingernails along the wall. Then came a soft, shaky moan. It sent chills racing across my skin. "Enough," Jen said, standing. "I'm going over there." Before I could stop her, she was in the hallway, knocking firmly on Adrian's door. The door opened a crack. Adrian's face appeared, pale as death. His pupils were dilated, with sweat beaded on his forehead. "What?" he rasped, barely above a whisper. "Look, man," Jen said, trying for calm but sounding angry. "We hear noises almost every night. Are you okay? Do you need help? Because this is getting unbearable. We can't sleep." Adrian swallowed, his eyes darting past Jen's shoulder, as if expecting someone else to appear. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging Jen's words, but not truly hearing them. Then, he said something that made no sense. "I can't help it. He won't stop. He never stops." Jen and I exchanged a baffled glance. "Who?" I asked softly. "Is someone bothering you?" Adrian's face twisted in terror. His eyes flicked upwards. For a moment, I thought I heard him choke back a sob. "Upstairs," he breathed, voice trembling. I can't sleep. I can't do anything. He's always..." His voice broke off, and he shuddered. We looked up at the ceiling. The apartment above Adrian's, and ours, was 4C. We barely knew who lived up there. I'd seen a tall man with glasses going up the stairs once, carrying groceries. He looked ordinary enough. We had no reason to suspect anything unusual. But Adrian's terror was real. He began to shake his head repeatedly, as if trying to deny something. "Adrian," Jen said carefully, "what's happening upstairs?" Adrian opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Then, as if terrified of his own voice, he mouthed, "He kills them," without letting the words fully form. The implication hit me like ice water. Adrian's eyes were wild now, and he looked ready to run. "They scream," he croaked. "I hear them all night. He drags them around, cuts them apart. I hear it all and I can't sleep. If I say anything..." He stopped, biting his lip hard enough to draw blood. "He'll know I heard. He'll kill me too." My jaw dropped. This was insane. We'd never heard any screams from upstairs. The building's walls were thin, but not that thin, right? Could Adrian be hallucinating? Sleep deprivation can cause strange delusions. But the raw fear in his eyes was impossible to dismiss. Before we could question him further, Adrian's eyes flickered down the hall, and he let out a panicked whimper. "He might hear. Please, just go," he whispered. He shut the door softly, leaving Jen and me standing in stunned silence. Back inside our apartment, we argued quietly. Jen was convinced that Adrian was mentally unwell. "He's sleep-deprived and paranoid," she said. "There's no way there's a serial killer upstairs." I wasn't so sure. You saw how scared he was. What if something is happening? What if he's too scared to report it? Jen grimaced. "We've never heard screams, honey. Just weird noises from Adrian himself. He could be the one making it all up in his head. Or he could be mixing up normal building sounds with, I don't know, nightmares." I nodded reluctantly. Yet that night, when I tried to sleep, I couldn't forget Adrian's pleading eyes. His words rattled in my mind. He kills them. He drags them around. I tried to picture the upstairs neighbour we'd glimpsed. Just a normal-looking guy carrying groceries. Could that be a mask, hiding something monstrous? We resolved to keep watch. The following night, Jen and I stayed awake longer, listening. Our building was mostly quiet after midnight. Occasionally, we heard distant footsteps, water running in the pipes, the hum of the radiator. But no screams, no thuds from above. Meanwhile, Adrian's condition worsened. He no longer crept softly through the halls. He ran, as if chased by invisible horrors. His door slammed late at night. Once, I found him in the lobby at 3 p.m, crouched behind a potted fern, trembling. When I called his name, he flinched and fled. We were nearing our breaking point. The tension, the sleeplessness, the sense of dread that had settled over our home. It was becoming unbearable. We even considered breaking our lease and finding another place. But we'd invested so much into this apartment. We decided to give it one more week. Then came the night I learned Adrian might not be so crazy. It was around 2:30 a.m. I'd been lying awake, earplugs out, listening for anything. Jen snored softly beside me. I was about to give up and try to sleep when I heard a muffled sound from above. Not from the side wall this time, but from our ceiling. A scuffle, a heavy thump. I held my breath. The building was old. Maybe someone dropped something. Then I heard a faint, choked cry. My blood turned to ice. I listened harder, straining my ears until my head ached. Another thump, softer. Then silence. I must have drifted off. In my dreams, I saw Adrian's terrified face and woke in a sweat. Morning light washed pale over our rumpled sheets. Jen stirred, and I told her what I thought I'd heard. She was skeptical, but she didn't dismiss me entirely. "We need to be sure," she said. "Maybe we can talk to some other neighbours. If something awful's going on upstairs, we can't just ignore it." We tried Mrs. Palmer again, but she wasn't forthcoming. She just shook her head and said, "Dear, you shouldn't involve yourself." We considered talking to Wallace, but he'd already made it very clear he wasn't interested in rumours. That left us one option. Talk to Adrian again. See if he'd give us any concrete details we could report. That evening, Jen and I waited until we heard him come home. Light footsteps in the hallway, followed by a creak as his door opened. We stepped out and knocked softly. It took several long minutes, but eventually Adrian cracked the door. This time, his eyes were even worse. Red, rimmed with tears, and he looked thinner, cheeks hollow. He smelled unwashed, and the apartment behind him was dark, with no lights on. I could barely see any furniture inside, just shadows. "Adrian," I said gently, "we believe you." His eyes widened at that, and a shaky breath escaped him. "We heard something last night. Not much, but maybe something." Jen nodded behind me, her arms folded. Adrian swallowed. He seemed reluctant, but something about our tone must have given him a shred of trust. He's taken so many," he whispered, voice trembling. "Women, mostly, but some men too. They scream at first, but by the end, they can't even do that. I hear him moving them around late at night. He's cutting them. I know it. The smell." He gagged suddenly, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I don't know where he disposes of them. Maybe piece by piece. I'm too scared to look. I'm too scared to say anything. If I call the police, he'll know. He'll come for me next." The idea was horrific. But was it true, or a fevered delusion? "Adrian," I said, "we can call the police anonymously. He won't know it's you. Please, you need help." He shook his head violently. "No, he knows everything. He watches everyone who comes and goes. If you call them, he'll know it was me. I'm closest. He's overhead every night. God, I can't sleep. I can't. He's upstairs right now, I'm sure of it." I glanced at Jen, who looked torn. Adrian's paranoia ran deep. He truly believed this murderer upstairs could read his mind. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "Adrian, we want to help. We can't just let this continue." His eyes snapped to the ceiling. He placed a finger to his lips, desperate. "Shh," he hissed. "You'll wake him. He sleeps during the day. Nights are his time to work." He shivered, cringing at some memory. "If you do anything, you must be silent. So silent." I was ready to suggest we leave and come up with a plan. But before I could, Adrian suddenly gasped and slammed the door in our faces. Through the wood, I heard him crying softly. Back in our apartment, Jen and I argued for hours. She insisted Adrian was delusional. If there's been a serial killer upstairs for months, where are the missing person reports? Where's the bad smell? She had a point. I'd never smelled anything that foul. Sure, the building had a musty odour, but not rotting flesh. And wouldn't someone have noticed? Friends or family of the victims? I countered that maybe the killer was careful. The building was old, with plenty of nooks and crannies. Maybe a disused basement or attic space. Who knew what secrets lay hidden? And Adrian's nightly noises. Could they really be him reacting in terror to what he hears above? Maybe when we thought it was him making sounds, he was just pacing in panic, or trying to drown out the noises of murder overhead. That could explain his increasingly dishevelled state. We reached a stalemate. Ultimately, we decided we couldn't just do nothing. I fumbled with my phone, heart thudding. If I called the police and they found nothing, we might be labelled as hysterical. But if Adrian was right and we did nothing, Jen took my hand. "Do it," she said quietly. "Better safe than sorry." That night, I made the anonymous call. I said I heard suspicious noises in the building, something that sounded like screams. I gave the address and hung up. We turned off the lights and waited. Time crawled. At around midnight, I heard faint footsteps in the stairwell. Police officers, maybe. Jen and I hovered by our peephole, watching. 2 uniformed cops climbed the stairs, stopping briefly at our floor. They looked around, listening. My mouth went dry as I realised they might knock on our door, asking questions. But they didn't. Instead, they went up one more flight, to the 4th floor. We waited, straining to hear. Minutes passed. 10 minutes. 15. I started to fear the worst. Maybe the killer had heard us and was lying in wait, his knife raised. Jen squeezed my hand until my knuckles ached. Then, we heard them coming back down. I peered through the peephole and saw the officers leaving, their faces calm and unconcerned. They found nothing. No screams, no victims, nothing. The building remained silent. Our anonymous call had yielded nothing but our own trembling disappointment. Jen sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I told you," she said gently. "He's just unwell. He needs professional help." We agreed. Tomorrow, we would contact a mental health service or talk to the landlord about a wellness check. Anything to get Adrian help. We just needed sleep now. In the early hours, after lying awake for what felt like hours, I finally drifted into an uneasy doze. Sometime before dawn, I jerked awake. A horrible sound had ripped through the silence. I grabbed Jen, who stirred groggily. There it was again, a scream, choked off abruptly. Not from Adrian's apartment, from above. Jen leapt out of bed. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, terror freezing my tongue. She nodded. The sound was too distinct, a human cry being cut short. We stood, trembling, as heavy footsteps pounded above us. Something was being dragged across the floor, like a body. We rushed into the hallway. To our shock, we saw Adrian's door wide open. Inside, the lights were still off. "Adrian?" Jen called softly, stepping inside. I followed, flipping on a light switch. The apartment was almost empty. Just a mattress on the floor, no sheets, a few scattered belongings. It stank of stale sweat and fear. Adrian was gone. Another disconcerting sound from above shook me to my very core. I looked up, noticing a small vent in Adrian's ceiling, probably connected to upstairs somehow. Was he trying to confront the killer himself? Jen and I ran out into the stairwell and climbed the steps to the 4th floor. We stood for a few moments outside 4C. The door looked ordinary. Jen knocked, her voice shaking. "Hello?" No answer. We tried the handle. It was unlocked. The door swung open with a low creak. The apartment was dim, lit only by a weak hallway bulb. Inside smelled foul, a sharp metallic tang that made me gag. Jen flicked a light switch, and for a moment, I wished she hadn't. The living room was bare, except for a plastic sheet on the floor, and dark stains that could only be blood. My vision swam. Bundles of cloth and garbage bags were piled against the wall, some lumpy in ways I didn't want to imagine. Tools lay scattered, a handsaw, knives, pliers, all flecked with rust-coloured stains. A shape moved in the corner. It was Adrian, crouched by a closed door, tears streaming down his face. He turned and saw us, eyes wild with desperation. He held something in his hand. I realised it was a length of pipe. "He's in there," Adrian whispered, jerking his head at the door, presumably a bedroom or kitchen. "He just brought another one in tonight. I heard her screaming. I followed him through the vents. I saw everything." He trembled, voice cracking. "I can't take it anymore." Jen tried to speak, but she couldn't. I stepped forward. "Adrian, we have to leave," I managed. "Call the police again. Now we know." Adrian shook his head fiercely. "He'll kill us. We have to stop him now." He raised the pipe, stepping closer to the door. Suddenly, the door slammed open, and the man from 4C stepped out. Tall and unremarkable, except for the butcher's apron smeared with gore. He froze, glaring at us with cold fury. In that instant, Adrian lunged, swinging the pipe. The killer dodged with inhuman speed, slamming Adrian into the wall. Adrian screamed, more of a wail of terror than pain. Jen grabbed my arm, pulling me back into the hallway. "We have to help him," I cried. But the killer had a knife now, raised high. Adrian, sobbing, tried to push him away, but he was too weak from lack of sleep, too starved by fear. The killer's eyes flashed. I saw him grin, a hateful, silent grin, and bring the blade down. I turned away, choking back vomit. Jen pulled me down the stairs, our footsteps echoing in panic. We ran through the corridor, banging on doors, screaming for help. Doors opened a crack, with fearful eyes peering out. We screamed, "Call the police! He's killing him!" I didn't care if the murderer heard. We had to stop this. From upstairs, a sickening thump and a gurgling moan drifted down, followed by a deathly silence. We rushed outside into the chilly dawn, gasping for air. Another tenant, braver or more desperate than us, had already pulled out their phone and was dialing the police. Jen clung to me, shaking. Moments later, sirens wailed in the distance. The aftermath was a blur. Police stormed the building and discovered the grisly scene. They found Adrian's body and multiple human remains in various states of decomposition. The killer tried to flee through a fire escape, but was caught. We gave our statements, shock numbing our senses. The police asked if we'd suspected anything earlier. We told them about Adrian's terror, his ramblings, and how we doubted him. In the harsh light of day, it all seemed so obvious. The thin walls had spared us hearing the full extent of the horror above. Only Adrian, directly beneath the killer's lair, had borne the brunt of it. Too terrified to speak out, he'd let the madness consume him, trying in vain to warn us indirectly. He tried to keep quiet, not to alert the killer that he knew. But that silence tore at his sanity. We moved out the following week, breaking our lease without remorse. The landlord didn't protest. He had a scandal on his hands, and the police investigation would take months. We packed our belongings hurriedly, leaving behind the cheap furniture and the paint cans we never opened. As we drove away, I couldn't stop thinking about Adrian, how we dismissed him as odd and disturbed. He was a victim long before he died. He carried the weight of unimaginable horror and did all he could to survive just one more night. If we'd believed him sooner, maybe we could have saved him. Maybe. But fear does strange things to people, and we were all afraid. In the end, the building remained quiet and still, its secrets exposed to the world. We have our lives and each other, but the memory of that apartment lingers. Sometimes at night, when I can't sleep, I think about Adrian pressed against his wall, straining to keep silent, trapped by the terror of what he heard above. I picture him sitting awake, eyes bloodshot, every sound another scratch on his sanity. And I remember the look on his face when we last saw him alive. Determined, desperate, a broken man who tried to do the right thing, all too late. If there's any mercy in this world, I hope he finally found peace in the quiet darkness that followed, free at last from those terrible screams overhead. Macabre Horror here. I hope you enjoyed this horror story from a very talented author. Thanks so much for listening and supporting the channel. I'd appreciate if you could leave a comment below, as I love to hear from you all, and I'd appreciate if you can like and share, as that really helps as well. If you want more scary stories, check out the video or the playlist on screen.